Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure what the general theory of relativity on housing and education partnerships would turn out to be, but look forward to it. So our first panel discussion is an interesting one on a form of partnership that involves a kind of a third party. I'm not sure if Yentl is the right term to use, but in any case, colleagues from the Chicago Housing Authority, Cassandra Books, Denali Dasgupta from the University of Chicago, and Nick Mader, also from the University of Chicago, to talk about ways in which the university, housing, and education systems are working together. So please, without further ado, come on up and thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here sharing our work, and because it is still only 9:30 in the morning in Chicago, I'd like to say to everybody, good morning. Can we do that again? Good morning. Thank you.
You can see it on the right.
There we go. So Nick and Cassie and I are so excited to be here today to share some work from a research and practice partnership that we have between the Chicago Housing Authority and Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago. Our partnership embeds data in decision making, and together we develop tools and strategies to help the Chicago Housing Authority in its work out in the field. But we're here to talk about more than just what it is that we're doing in Chicago. We're here to talk about anchor institutions as crucial hubs. And we want to demonstrate to you that the advantages of an anchor partnership are extensive for public housing authorities who are looking to improve practice in the educational support space. So we're going to talk a little bit about the partnership structure that we have. We're going to talk a little bit about the specifics of our work, and we're going to end with some highlights that show that we are actually doing this work, not just talking about it. And if everything goes as planned, we'll also have some time to take questions. So this is a definition of what an anchor partnership is that was particularly meaningful to us. And there's sort of 5 places where this resonates with us, and we put them in bold text. So it's mutually beneficial. We are organized around shared interests. We try to be efficient. We work on ambitiously co-created goals, and we're coordinated long-term. And I think these 5 things are really important because of the particular types of social impact problems that we're working on. We're all here today to talk about the overlap of education and housing. The problems we work on are multi-system, they're cross-sector, and they're complex. This is work that's too large for any of us to do on our own, and we don't have in any of our one single institution the capacity or the expertise to do it. These problems are also happening in a shifting policy context. Although they are long-term problems, the approaches and priorities of the sector from various places will shift over time, and we have to be flexible and responsive to those. And finally, something we all know and doesn't get acknowledged enough, we are in a resource-constrained environment. We have to do way, way more with way less. And so that's why we think that anchor partnerships are the ideal vehicle for tackling these types of complex problems. We think that these partnerships give us, as an organization, an individual organization, and as partners, the scope, the expertise, and most importantly, the flexibility and resilience to tackle these types of issues. So we want to tell you a little bit about who we are. You see the 3 of us here. Nick and I are from Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, and Cassie is from the Housing Authority's Resident Services team. We have larger teams with us, but we are the core of this partnership. Anchor partnerships work on multiple levels within and across organizations. So here's us. But our partnership, our bilateral research partnership, is embedded in a much larger learning community called the Chapin Hall Collaborative, and I think there might be some handouts going around about that larger learning community, but we're 7 youth support organizations, plus a research partner who work on supporting decision-making for policymakers and improving outcomes for youth through data in a larger sense. And finally, each of us, our research team at Chapin Hall and Cassie's team at the Housing Authority, draw on a much larger network of resources in our home institutions, and that's what allows us to do work of this complexity. Quite simply, we are able to activate and leverage a ton of resources because each of our teams is embedded in a big structure. So here are the big structures. For us, it's Chapin Hall, which is a research center that does all sorts of work to improve the lives of vulnerable youth families and communities, and also the University of Chicago, which brings tremendous research power and connections within the city of Chicago.
Yes, and just as an awareness, it appears that with our PowerPoint, some of the fonts have shifted, and so we promise it looks a lot cleaner in our version than what you're seeing here, but we'll make do, and if there's any items that we need to call out on the fly, we will. So I'm from CHA, I'm in our resident services team, and the connection between our programs is direct. So Chapin is working with our resident services, our direct service team, as opposed to necessarily just engagement with a data team or a project management in that way. And so for resident services, we are focused on increasing quality of life, increasing academic achievement, increasing earning power. For education specifically, we have a scholarship program, a robust scholarship program offering 220 awards annually. We also have an intergovernmental relationship with our city colleges, making debt-free college available to our residents through vouchers and tuition, books, and fees. So we are very proud to be able to leverage this relationship to be able to make impacts in those areas.
So now we're going to return to our framing of an anchor partnership to illustrate how it is that we work together and why we feel like it's the right approach. And we are, and don't look at any of that. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about is that it's not just a partnership on paper. Hopefully you see the wonderful rapport that we have, but we spend a lot of time together and we work closely. And one of the things that comes out of that is a tremendous appreciation for us as researchers for what the Housing Authority brings to the table as a partner. And so for those of you who are at housing authorities, we thought this was a nice opportunity to hear from researchers about what we really like about working with the CHA. For starters, we serve a common population. Our research interests at Chapin Hall overlap very well with the population that the Housing Authority serves, so we do have that space of mutual interest. The Housing Authority works at a systems level, and that's a really good match for our research work. And so what we're able to bring out in research, they're able to implement large scale. And so that just makes it feel like a partnership that really matches well. The Housing Authority has a really deep knowledge and well-articulated needs. They can help put their perspective on the administrative data that we work with and our research questions, and we're really grateful for that. And something that, again, doesn't get acknowledged enough, the Housing Authority provides tremendously high-quality data. And without the quality of data, we can't really get high-quality results. So those are all the things that we love about working with you, Cassie. Thank you.
And there's also love going in the other direction. Particularly, one of the things this partnership really allows us to do is play to our strengths. Our strength as a direct service provider, their strength as a research partner. It gives us the opportunity to really focus on how our work on the ground is having an impact and to continue to question that with them. It's also very efficient. Our data team isn't doing the data matching. Our data team is not building these complex tables, but rather we have the time to focus on the analysis and what they tell us and ask further inquiry about how we can make more meaning out of the data. And then finally, this is a research partnership. They're not coming in as an evaluator to us. We are making joint inquiries and reiterating our areas where we want to learn more. So.
Would you like to join in on the Love Fest?
I would love to join on Love Fest. So actually, this is not something that we discussed as we were preparing, but if it helps fix it in your mind, Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago actually derives its name, which sounds like a dormitory, from the fact that in the 19th century it was a dormitory. It was a home for orphan children, and it provided housing and support for youth at the time. And for 100 years in Chapin Hall's history, it was a direct provider of housing and support services for the most disadvantaged youth in Chicago. In the last 30 years, it has become a research institution which has the charge of serving the same populations of youth, but being housed at the University of Chicago brings these the research resources that complement the expertise in programming of our partner organizations. So within our current standing, we are a third-party, nonprofit research institution at the University of Chicago, and as such, we have kind of a complementary institutional standing within the work that we do. As a research institution, that gives us standing with respect to federal educational rights and privacy statutes that allow us to become a clearinghouse for individual-level data. And so we have, of the many protections that we're able to provide, we have master data sharing agreements that we have established bilaterally with the Chicago Public Schools, the Chicago Police Department, the Juvenile Court of Cook County, the Illinois Department of Child and Family Services. The My Voice, My School is a questionnaire of climate, which is relationships, socio-emotional indicators, and perceptions of neighborhood safety. The National Student Clearinghouse Census for Information. So all of the compelling and poignant stories that we heard from CLPHA President Norman, from Deputy Secretary Cole, from Secretary Castro, about the interconnectedness of the institutions that youth are involved with. Our master data sharing agreements allow us to do the linkage across those domains so that we can coordinate the care and so that we can speak to the trajectories. Also institutionally, we have the legal frameworks, we have the technical frameworks, so we have restricted access, high security data servers so that we can store and that we can link individual level records on the data side, but then on the data use side, we are not a traditional evaluator. We are, it's a term of art, a developmental evaluator. So we are not independent, external, doing a one-time evaluation report that we're going to disseminate and conclude with. Rather, we are an embedded partnership, which, in this definition that we offered for an anchor institution, we are a long-term partner. We strategize, year over year for how our goals can evolve.
And so we just wanted to emphasize that with this, as discussed earlier, and as we'll surely talk more about in our data share agreements, this took a long time to set this partnership up, and a lot of due diligence was done in terms of making sure we had heavily vetted legal agreements and protections to ensure that the resident data was secure. So there was a long outgrowth before we started this actual sharing. And also the fact that this individual student level data is linked and de-identified aggregate data is returned to us quarterly. So our data never becomes part of their master data set. It is linked for our purposes and the information is returned to us. So it is a continued protection program. And then just within that, so you can see up here some of the items that we are bringing to the table. We are providing information on household, where our households are located, what the housing makeup is, whether it's voucher households or our public housing, as well as we do have some indicators in our data as far as whether the family or youth is participating with us in other program areas. So we're able to evaluate not just based on location, but also engagement.
And all of that information is received by us. That we use probabilistic record linkage, because there is not a designed interoperability between all of these data sets. That is linked to Chicago Public Schools data, and from there, Chapin Hall, through our institutional standing, has in-house storage of the Chicago Public Schools data, police department, court data, child abuse, neglect, out-of-home placement data, and so we have offered kind of a tip of the iceberg of types of indicators that we have within each one of these data set domains, which really span family stability, neighborhood violence, like adult resources, employment, numbers of opportunity youth, and community context. Help me. That's right. Well, and so like of classifications, within these indicators, we have a number of supports and risk factors, types of things like information about whether youth have become juvenile justice involved, if they've been arrested, if that has proceeded to court proceedings or hearings, but then also outcomes, even when they might leave the care of the housing authority, as to whether they go on to graduate from high school, whether they enroll and they persist in college. We're able to represent that back, track these youth longitudinally across domains and be able to report that back to the housing authority for action dissection.
Sorry, I'm just marveling at how quickly fonts change. So this sort of gives you a bit of a visual of what we as a housing authority knew about our youth. We are very focused on an individual level because we provide case management services, because we provide summer programs and engagement. So we were very focused on these kind of data points of how we address and support a youth individually. So we knew their age, the makeup of their household, where they were living. Also, you'll see there we include, we break out our housing and services by region. So we have these customized indicators called Region 4. We also knew the makeup in terms of the amount of income from the family and their participation. While that doesn't change how we serve, now with Chapin Hall's lens, we're able to put that youth in context and really start to understand a little more about how we're serving, how we're impacting, and really empower our case managers, provide some targeting of programs, It really has helped us to give a better lens to how we serve and design our interventions to support youth. So with some of these other outside data points, it doesn't necessarily change how we serve the youth. It just gives us a better lens and provides some information to our case management providers, our program designers, so that they can take those items into account when building programs. And so this slide, I think, really best describes how working with Chapin Hall for us has been a research partnership and not an evaluation. So once we did an initial match of our data, we started to question, what are the levers that we have as a housing authority? What are the unique aspects of being a resident that could have impact, that could have trends, that we could study and take a deeper dive looking at them? So for Chicago Housing Authority, we have 50,000 youth under 17. We have 10,000 living in public housing. These are rough estimates. I'm sure someone from my data team is screaming somewhere about that they're not the right numbers, but we want to start to look at how those outcomes are based by development. If there are changes based on the family income, based on what region they live in, or obviously opportunity area, how are those impacts changing? Also by schools and communities, whether the youth is in public housing or in an HCV household. I think also one of the very key items that has come out of our partnership with Chapin Hall has been developing a school-based peer group. So So for CHA, our youth demographics are not representative of the school district overall. So by making this peer group, we've been able to build a more valid comparison. So we are building a group that is non-CHA, but the same representation at the same schools. So we're able to evaluate how our subsidy and our programs are having a benefit against another youth who is in that same school. And I would encourage, if you are new on this research and data path, to work with someone or to think strategically within your organization about how we develop this group so that you can have an actual apples to apples comparison about our impact of programming and be able to measure it more efficiently.
As to say, I think for us, this is kind of where it really happens. As researchers, we get excited to see that the Housing Authority knows how to take the work that we're doing and put it into action and can really speak to its needs and its perspective so that we can go back to our code base and update it to create continuity between what we do in the research space and what they're able to do in the practice space. So this is the product of a lot of coordination between us and a lot of discussion and a lot of iteration, but it really represents, I think, let me speak for myself, I'm proudest of how this partnership really works because we are able to do things with it.
Right, and then, at the end of the day, it's how best do we support this youth? How best do we design the services? And so any information we can know more about that impact of family income can be another point in our toolkit to be able to serve them better. So, moving on. So we thought we'd give you a couple examples of how it works now that we've talked around it quite a bit. So we've highlighted 3 examples of our work together that provide just some insight in terms of the ways we're starting to think about things and how we're working together to build some results and impacts. Yes. So the first is English language learners. So this is a CHA and a CPS data point that we have matched. So CPS manages how many English language learners are in their population. And through our simple match together, we were able to understand that CHA has a significantly less population of English language learners than their school-based peers or than the district overall. And while this may not be sound incredibly significant, the other thing is that we learn to target it better. So because this is an iterative process, because we're working with a research partner, we say, okay, great, so we don't have as many English language learners as we thought, but can you tell us where they live? And they were able to do that because we're able to then segment the data by location. So of our 35 developments, we're able to identify that only 4 of our main developments had those English language learners. And so again, we're able to target those resources and serve them better. We're not going to be as focused on making sure that the same resources are distributed across every development. We're going to focus on those 4 and make sure those case management providers understand what is the makeup of their community. So I just thought this was a really neat, simple example for you to see just a match and what it can reveal in terms of that data. So in the chart, you'll see those are the 4 developments that are highlighted. The next item I wanted to go over a little bit was, I mentioned earlier, our regions. We have custom service areas. So we have 9 different case management providers. Those are community-based organizations that do our clinical services, they do workforce programs, and they each serve a different area of the city for CHA. And so I've included the most perplexing part of our map, which shows different case managers serving different areas. So it's not only the colors you see by those swaths of land, but there's even different service providers in those purple circles. So while that's not only a bit perplexing in terms of data, because these aren't zip codes, these aren't community areas, by having a research partner, we've been able to get down to the individual youth level and marketing those youth within regions to make sure that we're using the data, that we're providing information to our case managers in a way that supports them, and to our program designers as well. So, and we've been able to break out some sort of high-level snapshots for those regions to give them some information that is actionable for them. So that's kind of what you'll see over here. We've been able to segment the data by region to give them an idea of how their region is doing, but also comparisons, broad comparisons to other regions. Is this the highest region with students with IEPs? Is this, is this a key issue for my area, or is it just another item that is able to go? Did you have any other items? Okay.
Go ahead. I'll jump in.
You'll jump in. All
Soon
right.
enough.
So that's how we've been able to break things out by resident services regions. And then this is a big topic and something that we're going to take a couple minutes to unpack further. You've already heard several people speak of issues around chronic absenteeism. It is an incredible challenge, and is definitely a multi-systems approach, and that is what has been very important for us in tackling this with a research partner. They're not coming in to evaluate, they're not coming in to put a number on and walk away. We are building our way of strategizing and thinking about our chronic absenteeism issues and being able to find the right supports for them. So through our data match, we uncovered that our chronic absenteeism rate was 19%. Which is actionable alone. There's obviously an incredible amount of work for us to do, but we aren't able to make meaning out of it until we break it down by other factors. So we were able to break that down by grade level and understand how our youth are attending more or less regularly than that school-based peer group. So again, we're not comparing them to the district, we're comparing them to youth within those schools and seeing if they are doing better or if we need to incorporate more support. So we were thankfully able to find out that in grades 3 through 8, our youth are performing better than their peers, and they're getting to school more regularly. They are and are attending. We also identified some grades where that is not the case, and are working to build that out further. So we know that for our pre-K, for our kindergarten, and for our high school years, they are not performing at the same level of our peers. And so we bring that to our research partner and think about, well, what else do we know, and what else can we look at? And that's where we came up with the map to the right. So the map to the right is a sample of school attendance, where our youth go to school across the city of Chicago from that far star down at the bottom of the map. So that is the development that the youth, and all those dots represent schools that those youth go to. And the size of the dot corresponds to the number of youth going to that school. And the color of the dot corresponds to the quality of that school as rated by CPS. So, as you can see, for that far, far south development, we have youth traveling across the city, we have youth traveling to better performing schools, and we have youth traveling to poorer performing schools than are local to their community. So this, for us, gives us an opportunity to think about, we are a school choice, as you can obviously tell by this map, a school choice setup where students, especially in their high school years, can choose a school, can apply to charter schools, can enter lotteries to have other educational opportunities. So for us, this is an opportunity to think about, how are we part of that school choice discussion? What do we know, and how can we provide information to families to make sure that their school choice is successful in terms of their travel of their student? How are we supporting their students that are making larger travels? It provides a lot of opportunity for us to sort of think system-wide, not just in terms of supporting chronic absenteeism from a programmatic side, but thinking at a systems level, how we are making accessible options that are high quality, and how are we supporting youth to attend those schools. So this is a lot of coordination and a lot of steps went into thinking about our school travel as a component of this chronic absenteeism. We're not by any means saying it is the fullest extent, but we definitely think the data and the map alone resonates to think that this is a component, a core component for us to go into.
And I think that this slide and what underlies it is effectively the essence of what this represents is a partnership that exists over the long term and a developmental evaluation. So as Cassie was talking this through, where we had initially begun was the issue of chronic absenteeism, how we can divide that by subpopulations, how we can divide that by areas of the city. There was the question of how school choice could be an aspect of where kids are going to school, what schools those are, and so this was something that had happened over a long arc of time where we had said, well, this is an issue area where we think we can give counseling to families and youth. Can we generate these maps? When we took a look at this map, it's shocking how much dispersion there is, and we say, like, is this right? How can we understand this? How much mobility is there of youth? And so this is something that goes year over year, and rather than stopping at any given point, all of the data that we have to bear is not to conclude, but to raise hypotheses that we would revisit over time.
I was going to say, Cassie came to us with this use case of she has staff that work closely with families to kind of empower them and encourage them to make informed decisions about how they help their youth navigate the school system. And so that was kind of the mandate of this work. It was just, what information do the people who are on the front line need to know? And if we didn't have all of this data in all of these sectors and the ability to go back to Cassie and her team time and time again to say, well, what if we put this in, for Cassie to say, oh, that's really great, but could you put school quality in? How do we represent that? We would not have the breadth of information that it takes to bring it to the front line where that person is sitting down with that family and saying, here are all the considerations that you need to think about. Even to create a chronic absenteeism indicator, to create measures of travel time and mobility. All of this was built in because they said, here is what we need to do. How do we do it?
Right. And I think, anecdotally, we focus a lot on the individual. We focus a lot on those individual youth. And there are individual youth who are on this graph, who are going to a high-performing school or a well-performing school halfway across the city, who are doing incredibly well. But how are we supporting the students that realize a month into their new school halfway across the city that they won't be able to participate in after-school activities because there's no bus that's going to run and get them home in a time safely? That mom who had the job on the west side doesn't have it anymore, and so getting to school is now impractical. That we're just making sure that we're providing the supports and thinking about both the individual level side and the system side. It's not just about those individual youth and those individual programs and those individual case managers, but that we are thinking about how this data helps us to serve youth better with the fact that we have such a large scale and such a resource-constrained environment. So we're very thankful for this collaboration and our ability to be able to analyze some of our data better and serve our youth more effectively. So I think with that.
Yeah, well, so our time is extremely limited. We want to make sure that everything does stay brief and timely. Thank you, David. So we just wanted to offer a couple of hooks, just let you know we are extremely friendly folks. We are very excited to be here. Actually, our monthly meeting is occurring right about now in Chicago and is being run by our colleagues. So we are here to interact with you, dear audience. We sometimes get comments about our age, but you should know that I'm the principal investigator for the Chapin Hall Collaborative. Denali is the program manager. Cassie is on our executive group, effectively the board of advisors. So if there's anything that you care to ask us about our data sharing agreements, our contract structure, our indicators, how we do the scalable platform that allows us to do custom reporting, we are going to be here for the rest of the day. For tomorrow, we would love to talk to you during our the networking session that's been very graciously provided for. So please come and access us. It would really be a pleasure to foster this in conversations across other cities.
Great. Thank you all very, very much. About digital connections and their partnership. So thank you very much, and may I turn it over to the two of you.